Traynor. At least that's what I hear you're calling yourself these days. Your family mentioned you plan to travel to Milan Condovian. I could use your help. I've recently hired a small group of adventurers to secure some items from me. But I'm worried about them. I need someone to watch over them so they don't get themselves killed along the way, and so they don't decide to sell off powerful artifacts they're supposed to bring back. I'll have one of my servants meet you at the docks.
My family has been court wizards since before the Cataclysm. I grew up hearing about magic theory and history. Days spent with my father, we combed through old texts, looking for forgotten secrets to improve our magic. I don't have the skill of the great wizards yet, but I have forgotten more than most will ever know about magic. It's who my family has always been.
Traynors last. Then they began boring through the walls. The stone wall rumbled as they chewed through it. Dust and rubble showered down. The worms dropped to the cavern floor with wet slaps, writhing over each other in their eagerness to reach the crystal heart. Where their bodies touched the luminous floor, the light dimmed. The magic that had pulsed through this place for millennia, the crystallized essence of a dead god, was being drained, devoured. The air tasted thin, like breathing at the top of a mountain. Farron loosed an arrow. It punched through 3 of the creatures before stopping in a 4th. The wounded worms simply split apart at the injury and became 2 smaller worms, both still crawling forward. "They're feeding on it." Traynor's voice cut through the chaos. His hands moved in sharp, geometric patterns, and a sphere of green radiance bloomed at the temple entrance. The light was wrong, somehow. It made the eyes water to look at it. The worms, caught in its glow, burst like overripe fruit, spraying black fluid that sizzled where it struck stone. The smell of it, like burning hair and spoiled meat, filled the cavern. The remaining worms did not retreat. They pushed forward, shoving their writhing bodies against those dying in the light, using their brothers' corpses as shields. The dead piled up. The living climbed over them. Some forced their way around the edges of the spell, pressing so tightly against the cavern walls that their bodies squeezed and deformed, grey flesh bulging between cracks in the stone. Farron called out as he moved right. "I have this side." He dropped his bow and spread his fingers wide. The dirt walls erupted with thorned vines, green shoots punching through soil and stone, weaving together into a barrier of wooden spikes, each as long as a dagger. The first wave of worms impaled themselves without slowing. They died, but their bodies plugged the gaps. More worms crawled over the corpses, pressing forward, and the ones behind pushed the ones ahead onto fresh spikes. They were using their own dead as a bridge. Tenbatsu stood at the remaining gap, the flames that served as his hair burning so bright they cast sharp shadows across the cavern. His hands shook. Hank grabbed the Jinn's shoulder. "What can you do?" The flames flared red, almost white at their tips. "Nothing." Tenbatsu's voice cracked. "I am a druid of fire. I have fox fire. I have burning hands. I have walls of flame. But that," he thrust his chin toward the endless tide of grey, "I cannot stop that. There is no end to them." Hank pointed at the gap. "Firewall. Now." The Jinn obeyed. He spoke 3 words in a language that sounded like kindling catching, and fire roared up from the crystal floor. The flames burned orange and gold, then shifted to blue as they fed on the ambient magic. Worms caught in the blaze popped and sizzled, their moisture boiling inside them until their skins split and steam shrieked out. For a moment, the 3 barriers held. Green deathlight, thorned vines, hungry fire. Then, behind the barriers, the worms began to merge. They piled atop one another, grey bodies fusing together, teeth interlocking, mucus hardening into something like cartilage. Individual worms lost their shape, becoming masses of writhing flesh that grew larger, denser. Limbs formed. Not arms or legs, but crude appendages made of compressed bodies, hundreds of worms acting as muscle fiber. The merged creatures stood twice the height of a man. Their surfaces rippled constantly as the component worms shifted against each other. The first amalgamation walked through Traynor's killing light. Its outer layer died, worms bursting and sloughing off like burning skin. But the core pressed forward. By the time it cleared the spell, it had lost a third of its mass. It was still enormous. Still coming. Farron put 3 arrows into its center. They disappeared into the writhing surface and were slowly pushed back out, expelled like pus from infected flesh. A second amalgamation crashed through the vine wall. Thorns tore at it, ripping away chunks that fell to the ground and immediately began crawling independently toward the crystal heart. The third walked through fire. Yortal raised his staff and met the nearest creature's charge. The weapon connected with a sound like striking wet clay. Worms sprayed in all directions. The amalgamation's arm, such as it was, swept low and caught the dwarf across his midsection, lifting him from his feet and hurling him against the far wall. He hit hard and did not rise. Traynor spoke without turning from his spell. "Get him!" Hank was already moving. He reached Yortal and found him breathing, but blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth. Broken ribs? Shell? Probably worse. Hank dragged him back toward the group, boots scraping against crystal that grew dimmer with each passing moment. The barriers were failing. More amalgamations formed behind them. The cavern floor, once bright enough to read by, had faded to a dull grey luminescence. The air grew thinner still. Farron let out a breath as his last arrow struck home without effect. "We cannot hold this." Traynor turned to face the others. "No, we cannot." They retreated through the hole in the cavern ceiling. Tenbatsu transformed himself and Yortal into giant eagles with a gesture. The great birds collected Grog and Hank in their talons and rose through the shaft, wings beating against close stone walls. Traynor touched Farron and vanished, then reappeared above, silver light flickering around them. The surface offered no relief. The meadow clearing where they had fought the wingbreakers was silent. Bodies lay where they had fallen, already beginning to bloat in the heat. Weapons dripped blood and ash. Burn marks scarred the trees at the clearing's edge, and in several places the vegetation had died in perfect circles. Nothing moved except flies. Farron cupped his hands around his mouth as he shouted for the Drake Master. "Valgrith!" The name echoed off the distant hills and returned unanswered. He tried again with the dragon's name. "Talana!" Nothing. Then the necromancer spoke from the shadows beneath the trees, and his voice was wet and ragged, the sound of a throat that had rotted centuries ago, and kept speaking anyway. "No need to shout, Woodwalker. I am here." Vangalentar stepped into the light. He had been human-like once, perhaps, but that was long ago. His skin had the texture of dried leather stretched over sharp bones. His eyes were empty sockets, filled with pale green flame. He wore robes that might have been fine once, now stained with substances that did not bear examination. Around his feet, worms writhed in constant attendance, sliding over his bare toes like affectionate pets. This was the Lich who had nearly destroyed the old world, the reason they had travelled back through time itself to undo what he had done. And he was here, and whole, and his army was beneath their feet, draining the heart of a dead god. Tenbatsu set Yortal down gently, groaning as consciousness returned. Hank moved to stand beside Fërin, though he had no weapon that could harm what stood before them. The eagles transformed back into their true shapes. They had lost. All of them knew it. The Lich was beyond them, had always been, beyond them, and his endless worms were consuming the only power that might have changed that equation. Traynor spoke quietly, pitching his voice so only his companions could hear. "Gather close." They did. Even Yortal, clutching his side, limped into the circle. The wizard's eyes were fixed on Vangalentar, but his words were for them. Before the cataclysm, magic had 12 levels of power, not 9. The goddess who holds the weave now banned all workings above the 9th, and with good reason. What lies below us is enough to cast beyond that limit, perhaps enough to cast several times. Yortal understood what Traynor was suggesting. That kind of power killed gods. It's why it was banned. Yes, Traynor did not look away from the Lich. But if the worms drain the heart completely, the island dies. Everyone on it dies. Us, the Kindovians, everything. I am going back down. I will see what magic beyond magic can do. Tenbatsu's flames flared. We will protect you. Traynor shook his head. I can only transport one other. There was no time to weigh who would be best. He turned to look at the group, and his gaze fell on Hank. Simply because Hank stood closest. You. He gripped Hank's shoulder, spoke a word, and the world turned silver. They materialized in the cavern's heart, amidst the sickly green light of Traynor's spell, and Hank immediately doubled over as his stomach tried to climb out through his throat. The crystal floor pulsed beneath them, but wrongly now. The light that had once been warm and steady flickered like a dying heartbeat. The worms covered nearly every surface, a carpet of grey flesh that rippled and churned. Where the barriers had been, there was nothing but more worms, more amalgamations. Traynor's killing light still hung in the air where he had left it, a sphere of green radiance. The worms piled up around it, crawling and pressing close on all sides. They were so dense they shoved each other into the powerful magic, then sizzled and died. The smell of them filled the cavern, rot and death, and magic curdling like old milk. Hank's skin began to burn, not from heat, from the spell itself. The green light was never meant for living things to stand within. Their flesh was beginning to redden and blister, but it was the only thing keeping the worms at bay. Hank spat bile. It's killing us. Traynor's voice was calm, almost distant. Yes, but not as quickly as they will. He knelt and placed both palms flat against the crystal floor. The effect was immediate. Light flared up Traynor's arms, not the warm gold that had once filled this place, but something brighter, something that hurt to look at directly. His back arched. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged. The crystal beneath him began to glow, patterns spreading outward from his hands like frost forming on glass, and Hank could feel something changing in the air, some fundamental property of reality shifting. Above them, in a realm that existed alongside and within and beyond the mortal world, the goddess Mystra stirred. Someone had touched the forbidden. Someone had reached past the wards she had placed into the magic reserved only for gods. She looked for the source, but something obscured her vision. Something old. Something that predated her ascension. In the cavern, the worms froze. Every single one, thousands upon thousands of them, all stopped in the same instant, as though time itself had paused for them alone. The amalgamations collapsed, their component worms no longer moving to maintain cohesion. Then, Vangalentar appeared. The Lich materialized in front of Traynor, called across the distance by a power that would not be denied. The green flames in his eye sockets guttered and dimmed. His ancient body, held together by will and magic for centuries beyond counting, trembled like a leaf. His voice emerged as a whisper. "What is your command, Master?" Traynor rose slowly. Light still pulsed through his veins, visible beneath his skin. When he spoke, his voice resonated with harmonics that made Hank's teeth ache. "Destroy the Gaunt, all of them, every last one. Then transform yourself into an elf." He paused, and something that might have been satisfaction crossed his features. "And for the rest of your existence, you will sell chickens at the market. You will do nothing else." The Lich bowed his head. "As you command." Vangalentar reached into his own chest, his fingers passing through the dried flesh as though it were water. He withdrew a worm larger than the others, thick as a man's leg, pulsing with its own faint luminescence. Without hesitation, he pressed it into his skull. His empty eye sockets flared once, brilliant green, then faded to simple darkness. Around them, the worms began to die. They burst, black fluid spraying across the crystal floor. The sound of it was like rain on autumn leaves, a soft, continuous pattering that built and built as thousands of creatures perished in the same moment. Vangalentar passed his hand over his body. The dried skin smoothed, the sharp bones softened. Hair grew from his scalp, grey and thin but real. When the transformation finished, an elderly elf stood where the Lich had been. His eyes were the eyes of a man who had lived too long and done too much, but they were eyes now, not flames. He vanished without another word, teleporting away to begin his eternal penance. Hank turned to Traynor, found him staring down at his own legs. "We need to go. Whatever you did, it worked. We need to—" Then he saw what Traynor was looking at. The crystal floor was growing up the wizard's calves, not covering them, absorbing them. The boundary between flesh and crystal blurred, Traynor's skin taking on that same luminous quality, his legs becoming indistinguishable from the floor beneath them. Traynor did not seem surprised. He drew his family's long sword, a blade that had been in his line for 7 generations, and held it out to Hank. "If I leave this place, he goes free. The spell will break. This is the price." Hank did not take the sword. "There has to be another way." The crystal crept past Traynor's knees. "If there is no time." He thrust the blade forward, forcing Hank to catch it or let it fall. "After you save your family." The crystallization reached his waist now, climbing faster. "Save mine." Traynor spoke a single word, and Hank vanished in silver light. Hank reappeared at the surface, stumbling, and Tenbatsu caught him before he fell. The djinn looked past Hank toward the hole in the ground. His flames, always a window to his emotional state, burned low and blue. "Where is he?" Hank could not make his voice work. He shook his head. Tenbatsu understood. His flames guttered entirely for a moment, leaving him pale and diminished. The earth began to rumble. Slowly at first, then with gathering force. The abandoned temple shuddered and groaned. Walls that had stood for millennia collapsed inward. The entrance to the cavern below began to close, dirt and stone flowing into it like water filling a basin. The tunnel sealed itself. The shaft through which they had escaped compressed and vanished. Layer upon layer of earth settled into place, packing tight, as though the island itself was determined to hide what lay beneath. They watched it happen. None of them spoke. None of them tried to interfere. Whatever Traynor had done, whatever bargain he had struck with power beyond mortal understanding, it demanded this: the hiding, the forgetting. When the last of the earth had settled, Tenbatsu walked to where the entrance had been. He sat down heavily, his flames still burning that same mournful blue, and pressed his palms against the soil. The others did not ask what he intended. They simply stood guard while he worked. Druidic energy flowed out of him, visible as a faint green shimmer in the air. Plants responded. Seeds that had lain dormant in the soil cracked open and sent shoots upward. Bushes sprouted and spread. Saplings pushed through the ground, their growth accelerated beyond any natural pace, trunks thickening, branches reaching, leaves unfurling. The disturbed earth vanished beneath new growth. The scars of battle faded under spreading ferns and creeping vines. It took the rest of the day. Tenbatsu did not stop, did not rest, did not eat or drink. By evening, the clearing was unrecognizable. Virgin forest covered everything. No sign remained of the fight, the temple, the entrance to what lay below. A single tree stood taller than the rest, growing directly from the spot where the cavern entrance had been. Its trunk was broader than 3 men could span with their arms. Its bark was silver-gray, unlike any other tree on the island. Tenbatsu placed his hand against that bark. His flames, finally, shifted back toward orange, but they did not burn high. He spoke without turning around. We never knew his true name. His voice was rough from exhaustion, or grief, or both. Whoever he was before, wherever he came from, he kept those secrets. The Jinn took a long breath. His hand remained on the tree. But I know this. He saved us more times than I can count. He was the finest wizard I ever met. He was our greatest warrior. Farin stepped forward and placed his hand on the trunk beside Tenbatsu's. Then, Yortol, limping, supported by Grog. Finally, Hank, Traynor's sword still gripped in his hand. They stood there as the sun set, 5 companions around a tree that marked a grave no one would ever find. Tenbatsu spoke one last time. Rest well. Rest long. His flames flickered. You earned it.